Hi, I'm James, and in this video I'm taking a look at this, which is the HP Pavilion x360 convertible 14-DW1012NA. Now this is a convertible laptop with touchscreen from HP, which features the Intel Pentium Gold processor 7505, 128GB SATA M2 solid state drive, 4GB of DDR4 RAM, Windows 10 Home running in S mode, and a 14-inch 1080p IPS 250 nits of brightness and 42% or 45% I believe NTSC colour gamut. As I say, it is a touchscreen, and what I was quite surprised was, along with the power cable, there was this in the box. And this is something which doesn't come even on the HP MV x360 13 that I bought last year, and it is the stylus. So the MV I bought last year was double the price of this and did not include a stylus, but this Pavilion 14 does. And it's quite a nice design on these latest HP ones, unlike some of the old ones I used, which used a quadruple A battery, which meant I had to go out and buy quadruple A batteries. These ones have a sliding USB-C charge port and an internal battery, so you can just plug them in and connect them to the laptop to charge them, which is very nice. So turning our attention to the machine itself, and this is, as I said before, based on the Intel Pentium Gold 7505. This is a Tiger Lake based chip, so the same as you would find in the Intel 11th Gen Core range. So although not an absolute powerhouse, still a reasonably capable processor for most people's uses. Looking down this left hand side, we can see we have some venting here for cooling. We have a USB 3 port. It isn't actually marked blue or indicated as super speed, but it is a USB 3 Type A 5GB per second port. We have our headphone jack here, and then turning to the other side we have our charging port, HDMI 2.0 port, so this should do 4K 60Hz without issue, another USB 5GB per second port, so USB 3. Again, this isn't marked blue or labelled SS, they are just all of that specification. Our SD card reader, and also a USB-C port. Now this is 10GB per second and is capable of USB power delivery, DisplayPort 1.4 and HP Sleep and Charge. Now going back around the laptop, so we can see there is no Kensington lock, so if you're using this in public places, be aware of that. There is no solid anchoring point in the chassis itself. The laptop itself is also 1.61 kilograms, so not the lightest, but competitive for this size of chassis. So other things to note for this machine are that the wireless is 802.11ac, not Wi-Fi 6 802.11ax. This is via a Intel 9461 controller, and this also has Bluetooth 5, and we have a 3-cell 43 watt-hour battery, which HP believe or state will give you up to about 8.5 hours of battery life. And I just have the system on its back here because one of the first things I noticed is that actually we don't have a uniform chassis colour and finish. The back of this is sort of a dark grey, and it's a slightly textured finish. Now my first thought was actually, oh, that's quite nice, because if you're carrying this machine around, and this is something I've considered using for my work laptop as that needs a refresh, that actually gives you a slightly grippier surface than your sort of the internal glossy plastic finish of the machine. Looking inside, and what I first of all pick up, so we have quite a nice large touchpad. The keyboard, however, maintains HP's tradition of giving us UK English users a really weird keyboard layout. This time around we have So a full width shift key, and unlike some, including the HP MVX360 13 I got last year, it's no longer a function key for a backslash. We get our own key down here, but it should be up here. Obviously, if you're in the US or anywhere else in the world, it probably won't bother you. But this is one thing that trips me up and makes some of the HP machines quite annoying for me to switch between with my other laptops and desktop computers. Just they have some strange issues in their layout. Things like home, page up, page down, and end are on the end here. Power button is set in one, so delete is kind of where you expect it, which means you're not going to accidentally put it to sleep while in use, which is good, I suppose. As you can see, we have a sort of, again, dark grey. It's still a smooth finish, so if you're using this in tablet mode, it's not going to give you the same grip as the base, but it gives you a bit of visual difference from the silver on the lid and the side. So looking at it, colours are kind of a bit of a mishmash, but that's a minor aesthetic thing. Obviously, this is a convertible laptop, so we can pull the screen round, hello, because it is of course a glossy screen being a touch screen, and that folds flat and comes back around, and that's a fairly standard hinge layout, as you will find in the 2-in-1 Dells that I have covered in the past, the HP MV 13-inch x360 and so on. This is fairly typical of a 2-in-1 design. With the laptop fired up, and we can see here the design gives us reasonably slim bezels at the sides, quite a large chin at the bottom, and top bezel here with built-in webcam. I'd say some designs definitely thin these down a bit more. Also, there seems to be some sort of light sections, so maybe some componentry beneath the speaker grill that you can see, which makes it look like there's dirt in there, but I don't think there isn't. It's slightly odd, but a very minor thing there. So turning our attention to the laptop itself, I have already switched this out of S mode because I want to run desktop applications on here, just done by making the switch through the Windows Store. It prompts you when you try to run a standard Windows application rather than one delivered through the store. We can see the Pentium Gold 7505, 4GB of RAM, and we can see the ships with Windows 10 Home 2004 build, so you will have some updates to do to bring that up to 21H1. Looking at pre-installed software, we have a few bits like Alexa, Amazon. Then there are the plethora of HP tools, McAfee Personal Security, which I would be getting rid of, more HP, a solitaire game, and so on. So not too much. You do see worse offenders, but personally I would not be using the McAfee antivirus on here. I'd be removing that, but I wouldn't say anything here that would just be making me want to go wipe the machine and reformat straight from the off. Looking at the system with CPU Z, and we can see here, so with these Tiger Lake U based Pentium chips, that we get a 2-core and 4-thread processor. So these are effectively becoming like the Core i3s, a bit lower clocked than the i3 1115 G4 that I have looked at in the past, only 3.5 GHz turbo rather than 4 GHz. But the hyperthreading is enabled where it was not on the previous generations of Pentium chips. Looking at the memory, and we can see we have DDR4 single channel, obviously because we have a single 4GB DIMM in here, and running at 4x 800 MHz, so the DDR4 3200 speed. Interestingly, that it does drop itself down at times. And again, we can see here the module is there as well. But yes, so we are getting the DDR4 3200 speeds. Unlike some of the Dell machines that I looked at, like the 3000 series, they don't artificially limit it to 2666. Looking at Open Hardware Monitor and Cinebench. And this is a 15-watt chip in its default configuration. And if we are to run the CPU test, in my initial running with the laptop during setup, it's been very quiet, less audible than other machines I have running in this office with my main desktop machine. And we can see going into Cinebench R20 run, we are getting 3.4 GHz, so a bit down on the max turbo bin. Temperatures are increasing and we're using up to 20 watts, which should drop down to 15 after a little bit of time. And if we allow the temperatures to increase and see where they go, we start to hear the laptop ramp up in volume, and we can see that power consumption has dropped down to 15 watts now. Temperatures then have stabilised and are in fact decreasing with the fan speed increase and the 15-watt power cap, as have the clock speeds, which have now come down to around 2.8, 2.9 GHz. And I would not be surprised if the fan noise starts to decrease. Obviously, just being a 2-core 4-thread chip, this is not going to set any speed records, and I'm not actually too worried in this particular video about the overall result. The SSD in this machine is only 128 GB and it is a SATA type device. If we run Crystal Disk Mark on here, we will see that we get the results that we are more or less expecting, which is .550 MB on read, which is very near the limits for a SATA 6 GB device, but being a small 128 GB SSD and the lower cost option for the chassis, I believe the chassis does support NVMe type drives, and I will be testing this along with upgrading the RAM in another video. And we can see, because it is this low capacity drive with not many channels of DIMMs and presumably no DRAM on it as well, we only get 206 MB on write speed. So you have to judge this as a budget entry in these convertible form factors of machines. While a lot of people go, this is atrocious, this is entry-level SSD performance, it's still a lot better than having a mechanical hard drive in there. And I've been quite impressed just with how snappy and responsive the machine is in general usage. For basic use, so emailing, web browsing, light gaming, nothing too intensive, it's going to be absolutely fine. And you do have those upgradable options in there. Certainly the 4 GB of RAM would be quite limiting. I will be increasing that, and also a bigger SSD for me, but then you're going into a more expensive machine and you may just be better spending more in the first place. The pen we can see here, while it is charging, it would flash this light to indicate the battery is low when in use. Amber means it is charging, and it would go white when fully charged. For now, however, I'm going to disconnect, and we can see, so response with stylus is good. I can slide back in that charging point. And just doing some, I am not the greatest artist in the world, but we can see, so response is not too far behind. And this is the HP Rechargeable Active Pen. As I can say, I wasn't expecting to find this in the box when I bought the machine. It was not listed in the specifications at all. But we can see, so there are 4,096 levels of touch sensitivity on this. It has tilt operation. I have to admit, I am not an expert in this stylus usage. The hover height is around 5mm, and there are also a couple different nibs included in the box for different types of use. But we can see here there is obviously a difference between a light touch and a hard touch in what you produce. So Not something I'm an expert in, but it was a real nice bonus to find this in the box. I was not expecting it, and it wasn't listed in the Amazon page that I bought this from, so a real bonus there. Looking at the output from the webcam, and we have a 720p camera built into the top of the screen here, and dual array microphones, so we should have some degree of stereo sound. In a well-lit, bright room, the image isn't too grainy. We can see some noise over on this side, but I'd say an acceptable, usable image, particularly just for video conferencing. Connecting up with my Anker 7-in-1 USB-C hub and power supply, we can see here that the USB-C power delivery is working, and if we follow the cables along, we are outputting to this display here. So the DisplayPort component working as well. Unfortunately, this Anker unit is only 4K 30 Hz, but connecting via the HDMI 2 port does indeed give a 4K 60 Hz output, as you would hope. So I hope you found this video interesting. While not perfect for the asking price, I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised by this system. The screen is perfectly acceptable. It's nice to see at this price point an IPS display, and 250 nits brightness is a nice increase again over the sort of 200 you will find in a lot of budget laptops. These Tiger Lake Pentiums offer quite a nice increase in performance over previous generations, both with the introduction of hyperthreading and the increased power of the Intel UHD graphics having 48 execution units. Obviously, you are compromising to get this convertible form factor. You're only getting 4GB of RAM and 128GB SSD, whereas you might expect 8 and a 256GB SSD, and it's only a SATA SSD, but at least you have some upgradability in here, which we will be looking at in another video. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, just put them in the comments below. I will do my best to answer them. Hit subscribe if you would like to see more videos as we post them. Check out that upgradability video if it is useful to you. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.